One evening Harold got out of bed, took his purple crayon and the moon along, and went for a walk in an enchanted garden. Nothing grew in it. If he hadn't known it was an enchanted garden, Harold had to make sure the castle was big enough to be the king's. He didn't want to waste time talking to any princes or earls or dukes. This was a king's castle, all right. Harold shouted for the king to come down and let him in. But the gate didn't open. He walked along the edge of the enchanted garden beside the smooth wall of the castle, until he thought of his purple crayon. A person smaller than a very small mouse would be able to get in. As he gazed around inside the big castle, Harold felt very tiny. And a king might not pay much attention to anybody who was smaller than a mouse. So Harold used his purple crayon again. He made sure he was as tall as 4.5 steps of stairs, his usual height. Then he climbed up the stairs, looking for the king. He went up and up and up, until he got so tired he couldn't climb another step. Luckily, there were no more steps. He had reached the top. He still couldn't find the king. But he remembered kings sat on thrones. He tried it with the king's crown. It was all right for a while, but the crown began to feel heavy. So Harold put it on the king's head. As he thanked the king for the loan of the crown, the giant, or witch, if the king couldn't tell which it was invisible. But Harold told the king not to worry. He set off to find the invisible witch or giant, brandishing his purple crayon. And, accidentally, it made a hole in the wall. The accident embarrassed Harold. But the hole was the handiest way out of the castle, and he climbed through it. When he looked down from the other side of the hole, he realized he had forgotten how high up he was. He needed something tall to climb down on, something as tall as a steeple. It wasn't a steeple. It was a pointed hat. It was a giant witch. The purple crayon made it plain, it was an invisible giant witch. Well, no wonder nothing grew in the enchanted garden. How could anything grow, Harold said to himself, with a giant witch tramping around with big feet? Now that he saw what the trouble was, all Harold had to do was drive the witch out of the enchanted garden. Mosquitoes. Mosquitoes, Harold knew, will drive anybody out of a garden. The mosquitoes drove out the witch. To put out the fire, he first thought of fire engines. But he decided to make it rain. Rain was easier. The rain soaked everything, Harold too. But, he said, it's good for the flowers. He was right. Soon there were flowers. Beautiful flowers popped up all over the enchanted garden, more than Harold was able to count, all in gorgeous bloom. The last flower turned out to be not a flower at all, but a lovely fairy. She held out her magic wand as fairies always do when they're giving somebody wishes that will come true. Harold couldn't think of a thing to wish for. But, to be polite, he took one wish and told the fairy he'd use it later. Besides, Harold thought, as he started on his long walk home, a wish might come in handy sometime. After all the excitement, he suddenly felt tired, and he stopped to rest a while. He sat on a small rug because the ground was still somewhat damp from the rain. Harold realized he didn't know how to stop the carpet or even slow it down. He wished he'd taken 2 wishes from the fairy, so he could wish the flying carpet would land.